When I was a kid, this would all be dry. There was no water at all there. Let's see here. Right here we go, watch. And like I said, you're gonna see the difference. I said, this is where we're standing at right here when I took these pictures right here. I mean, where's the trees at? Monday, October 11th, 1999. Back then you started noticing the differences and everything. I mean, you can see all the land and everything right here. And now it's all open ponds and everything. It looks more like a lake than anything else. I mean, just looking, you think it's always been like that. Eventually, this right here, another hurricane, all of this land's gonna be gone too.
The current state of Louisiana's coast is a coasting crisis. That right now we have an area that was built naturally over around 7,000, 7,500 years that was once 4.5 million acres. And we're now less than half of that. And most of that collapse has happened on our watch.
We're sinking at the fastest rate of any large coastal landscape on the planet.
The city of New Orleans will be gone in 90 years. It's getting closer and closer.
I'm very worried when I look at the maps, when I see the projections of what coastal land loss will be. Anyone who's seen the map of what we're supposed to look like in 2100 should be horrified. There's nothing left of South Louisiana. Another major storm, it could make Katrina look like child's play.
The projections with sea level rise and current subsidence rates are that within 100 years, most of what we think of as South Louisiana will be functionally gone. Essentially, we're watching the collapse of an ecosystem.
Land loss has been catastrophic during the 20th century, and so there's natural processes of land loss like hurricanes and subsidence and things like that that we think have been going on for hundreds and thousands of years. They can't by themselves account for this massive loss that we experienced during the 20th century. So we have to look at what happened during the 20th century, and essentially we did a lot of things to modify this coast. We put levees along the river in order to stop places flooding. My house, your house, the city of New Orleans, in order to stop it flooding. We dredged deep channels so that we could get to inland ports from offshore, like the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet or the Homer Navigation Canal. And they kind of altered the balance between salt and fresh water within the estuary, which caused a lot of cypress swamp particularly to die in many places across the coast. We dredged thousands of miles of oil and gas canals through the coast to get at oil and gas resources that really drove the economy of this country for decades. We have lots of things coming together in the 20th century that really meant that, we lost thousands of square miles of land.
How has the landscape that you live on changed during your lifetime?
My entire life I heard that in 30 years Chauvin was going to be underwater, and although it hasn't happened as literally as I maybe perceived it in my head as a kid, I've definitely watched this community in particular shrink over especially the last 10 years, incredibly. This is a community where there used to be 3 elementary schools, and in the last 2 years, 2 of them have closed down, and now all of our children are at one school. Year after year, the land is disappearing, and between that and the lack of barrier islands now, when the water comes, it doesn't want to leave. You know, we have hurricanes and winds that push this water inland, and because of that, I mean, you either have to move up north or you have to raise your house in the air to avoid water.
You just don't have no barriers no
No.
more, none to stop this surge of water coming in.
And what happened to it?
There's a lot of factors that comes into why the land has been eroded. The oil companies, the subsidence of the land, you know, climate change, the rising of sea level. And so when you take all of those factors and put it together, I mean, how do we have a fight down here?
Well, coastal Louisiana has always been kind of where the heart of Louisiana's population and economy have been. It was the part that produced the most in the way of agriculture, industry, fisheries, you know, oil and gas, and all of those things that were mainstays of our economy. This has been, in many ways, the engine, you know, the economic and cultural engine for Louisiana. And for the United States, the Louisiana Purchase was fundamentally the New Orleans Purchase. And the country's never been the same since.
I grew up in New Orleans. It's a city that is geographically placed in an area where you really shouldn't have a major city. There's a river here, but we're at great risk all the time. The thing that has protected New Orleans, particularly to the east of the city, but also to the south of the city, are the wetlands. And as the wetlands sink and disappear, we become more and more vulnerable to storms. People in New Orleans don't grasp that concept and how important it is when they live in the city. With a combination of subsidence and sea level rise, we're facing an astronomical, really the collapse of the Delta. And if that happens, this city is going to be Gulfside property.
I was born at the Charity Hospital on Tulane Street in 1947, and I was brought to the lower Ninth Ward as soon as my mother got out the hospital, and I'm still in the lower Ninth Ward. In fact, I was about 2 blocks on Tonty Street and 3 blocks down, I'm in the bayou. This wetland was full of cypress trees, full of lilies, full of game, full of birds, full of gators and everything. All this was wetlands, as far as your eyes could see. Of course, I've been a tree hugger all my life, and and dealing and playing, and as a kid playing in the wetlands, and as a man trapping. And at the time, there were people with real jobs that make some of the money that was made in the wetlands, I got interested in it because it was fun to me, and animals never caused me as much problem as human beings did. So when I was sad, I went in the wetlands. When I was happy, I went in the wetlands. When I was a kid, the cypress trees was less than 3 or 4 feet apart, and some of them were so close together that we didn't even need a paddle in our pirogues to go from one end to the other. We just grabbed the stumps on the side of the trees and just pull our way through. People were sort of skeptical of the wetlands. See, when I come up, that was fresh. And there were water moccasins everywhere, snakes everywhere. So if you were squeamish of snakes, you wouldn't go back there. More and more people got interested in the wetlands, and because of the natural buffer that the wetlands protects you against hurricanes and storms. If you have a good central wetland system, each mile of that central wetland system cuts down the wind about 13 to 20 miles an hour. And it's 75 and 80 miles in some places getting to the Gulf. In fact, if you had 100 miles an hour wind and it was good, healthy swamp, that wind would be cut down to about 20 or 30 miles an hour, and it wouldn't cause that type of damage to the city. So people say, well, what is the wetlands? Well, you're eating a shrimp sandwich. Where do you think they come from? You like gumbo with crabs in it. Where you think they come from? You need to find out where everything comes from. Then you'll realize that everything is important.
You know, the Earth is a pretty well-designed system and everything works. But the sinking that we've had in recent years is man-made. I studied geology most of my life, and most of the problems we have, not all, not earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and things like that, but humans have caused a lot of problems because they don't understand how the planet works. If ever anything was well designed, it's our Mississippi drainage system. We're getting sediment from 2/3 of the states in the United States, and it's all coming down here. So it's carrying almost in volume almost as much sediment as it is water. Here it's coming pretty fast. When it gets to the delta, it spreads out, the velocity stops, and sedimentation takes place. And when the sedimentation takes place, it builds land, but pretty soon it builds the land high enough to where the river cannot flow uphill. So what happens is it chokes itself up. Somewhere along the line, it breaks loose and goes somewhere else. And so these are all the deltas. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 deltas. Just merely points out, just in these last few years, the number of deltas that were formed. This works because it doesn't stay in one place. It builds land here, chokes up with sediment, and goes over here and builds some more. Perfectly designed system, and what it is here is our beautiful South Louisiana. And believe me, if times really got hard, you'd want to be down here. In prehistoric times, Native Americans living here, in 15 minutes of each day, they could get everything they needed to eat in 15 minutes. It was a paradise. It really was.
Most of the population that it affects on the coast is Native Americans because that's where we are, at the end of the earth. At the library, they showed a map and they said like 50 years it wouldn't be here anymore. Well, it's kind of scary and it's hard at the same time, hard to believe. But then when you look and you see how fast it's washing away, then you figured, well, yeah, it's a reality that it will happen unless something is done. I do some oral history translating because it's in French, so I translate it to English, and so I learn a lot about our past. Life was life, and they enjoyed it. Like when the Great Depression happened, people down here didn't know they had a depression. They had their food because they always fished and planted. They had their chickens and everything, They had no money, so, the depression didn't affect them.
We got everything down here. Shrimp, crabs, oysters, fish. You had everything right there. But when you needed meat, they'd butcher a cow, split it up between everybody. That's how things were did. You didn't go buy meat at the store. You had it right there. You lived off the land. And that's how we've always done it. We've always gone with the flow. But now, like I said, it seems like the flow's against us.
For a long time, people was able to live off the land, but that's a dying skill because when you live somewhere, let's talk about Point of Shannon and a lot of the Native Americans, I learned because they're able to show me on the island where they used to hunt, where they used to have their garden. And they tried, when they tell their story, they tried to get me to envision that, when there was a boy deer hunting right there. And I don't think I see his water. They literally trying to paint a picture with their words that I would never see, because the only thing I see is water. Man, this is America. Why do I have to imagine a culture? This is not Atlantis, this is not a lost city. This is people who's 50, 60 years old that's saying this has happened over my lifetime.
Now, the only thing is now, humans are controlling this. It would like to get out of where it is. It's not building too much land anymore because it's going into the deep Gulf, because we've got it all levied all along here. And because of the levees, the river can't run wild and free, which it did in the past. Those levees start failing. You could have 6 feet of water right here overnight from the river.
This was my backyard. This is where I grew up. Hop on. Y'all didn't know they still did this, huh? Oh, passengers, please get off. This is our hurricane protection levee right here. And when you get a storm, the water comes over this. But this right here used to be able to walk all the way back there to where the trees are. See where that tree's at way back there? Yeah. This used to dry up and you'd actually walk all the way to that. Like I said, when I was a kid, the water was ankle deep right here. Just to give you a rough idea. You're going from ankle deep. Okay, that's right up against the dock. That's knee deep. And then the further out you go, you're gonna get waist deep up to your neck. It's just enough to get you by, is what it is. Keep you out the water. Because I think the last hurricane they had over here, they had like 9 feet of water underneath these houses. Okay, this was for a storm when it was starting to flood. The water was starting to come in. When it was actually swimming in that flood water. Put it this way, you get one good hurricane, these marshes around here, that's all gonna be gone. It'll wipe it all out. I'll be able to fish on my porch right there. Seriously.
Well, we made the decision to levee the river as soon as the Europeans arrived. I mean, it was very clear, particularly when you get down this far, that you're dealing with an area that is subject to annual floods and the occasional really big water. And in order to have towns, farms, factories, things like that, we built these levees. But we straitjacketed the river, and we began starving this delta of the thing it most desperately needs, which is river influence. And that was well known, even in the 19th century. We sort of made it our business to forget it for a while. We tend to be reminded, in the harshest ways, that we have not yet tamed this system.
We started to manage the river both for navigation so that we could get in and out of the mouth of the river very efficiently, but also so that our houses and our communities and our industries and our homes didn't flood when the river rose in flood. And so those kinds of management meant that we stopped some of the natural dynamics that the river would ordinarily have. We stopped that switching process, for instance. We kind of locking it in place. We don't let the river overflow its banks in the spring with the spring flood, and we don't let it switch locations like it used to. We don't let it carve new bayous like it used to. We don't let it build new deltas in many places. So we've essentially managed for some functions that are very important to us as society, but by doing that, we've kind of eliminated some others.
The first levees were about 5 feet high, and it was on top of the natural levee of the river. And they would only protect one person's land. So they weren't much in the way of levees, but they would keep the average, spring high water if it wasn't too high, and even those would leak. When you put levees on either side of the river, what you do is you increase the height of every flood. Because instead of spreading out, right, you squeeze it in, which means the water's higher. So your levees have to be higher. And then when it slows down, the bottom silts in, so your river's not as deep. So then when the next flood comes, it's going to be higher still. We would keep having these big floods, and by then there were significant economic resources up and down the river. And the big final turning point was the Great Flood of 1927.
1927. Then the giant stormed down the valley in his greatest fury. Scores of lives were lost. Thousands of people were left homeless and destitute. Refugee camps were established to cope with this national disaster.
All of the Mississippi Valley from Illinois south was flooded. Over 1 million people, almost 1 million people, were homeless. 200 people had died, which was a lot at that time. And Congress ordered the Corps, never let this happen again. So they passed the Mississippi River and Tributaries Act, and the Corps was charged with making the land around the river safe. And they built the largest, best levee system in the world. And they had a couple of spillways, Bonnet-Carré and Morganza. And by the mid-30s, they were finished. And that shut off the sediment from the deltas. At that point, that was a death sentence for most of southeast Louisiana because it's all built by the river.
All real estate in Louisiana is developed because levees are in place to keep them from flooding. The difficulty becomes when the land behind the levee starts to collapse, which it does. And then when the levees start to collapse, which they do. The far greater effect of levees is the strangulation they impose on the marsh as they settle down on the marsh. They compact subsurface flow. It's just as if somebody stepped on your neck. So levees are walls, and that effect is dramatic.
See what we do down south. We pump water out the wetlands. We pump it out, and then we put a levee around it so it stays dry. And then we build houses. So when Mother Nature tries to get back where it normally should be, it causes a flood. When the levee breach, the water goes back to where it's supposed to be, which is the lower point. Water don't run uphill, it runs downhill. So it ends up back where it's supposed to be. Taking and not putting back is the problem. This not only in this continental United States, it's on the whole globe itself that we are neglecting our natural resources, our mountains, our valleys, our streams, our lakes. We don't have to do that to survive. People survived before then. We're more modern. We walk around with phones and computers in our pocket. We can't figure out a way to save this earth. I'll tell you what, you can't live anywhere else yet.
If all we had done is put levees up, scientists tell us that the wetlands that existed here in the 1930s would still be pretty much intact today. So why did we lose almost 2,000 square miles of those wetlands, more than half of what surrounded this city in the 1930s? Well, that's related primarily to 10,000 miles of oil and gas canals and pipelines that have been laid down over the decades going back to the 1940s and 50s. 90% of the nation's offshore oil and gas supply comes through our state. 50% of the nation's total refining capacity is in Louisiana. We're responsible for 20% of the nation's total energy supply.
Pipeline canals were dug to access oil and gas. You know, these pipeline canals, they would let salt water go into interior marshes, and it would really alter the salinity of area overnight.
Even down here, they used to be groves of oak trees. And what happens when that saltwater intrusion occurs is that it petrifies all these cypress and oak trees that used to hold the land together and act as a protective barrier. And now we just have these skeletal trees. I mean, it's tragic.
The oil and gas extraction process itself, if you're sucking out oil and gas, what's naturally going to happen? The area is going to sink at a quicker rate. In this area, everywhere there was wells at, oil fields, that land went away first.
If you build a canal, the impact isn't just the open water that you're floating the boat through. It's what the canal and the levees alongside the canal do to all the adjacent marsh. They cut off the circulation. These canals double in width over time and then double again. Not only do we dig ever larger canals to accommodate ever larger rigs, and not only did we dig ever more extensive networks of canals, so that when you fly over and look down, you see you're looking at a body that's been absolutely ripped to shreds. The industry kept the damage hidden for a good half a century, 50 years. They had documentation going decades back that, yeah, these were killer. Ironically, state regulations require them to restore. And those regulations have not been obeyed any more than the state obeys other regulations. They just, when oil and gas speaks, the state says, yes, sir.
Down here, the oil industry has dominated this area for so long, that's all people know. That and commercial fishing. And right now, commercial fishing, I mean, that's a hard way of life.
Yeah.
That's why all these young kids are going to the oil field.
Right.
Because like I said, the money's there.
Right. And there are still some people who find the culture significant enough to want to fight for it, but the majority of people make their money from that oil field. And what do you do? How do you choose? I mean, if we shut down drilling in the Gulf, nobody's going to be able to live down here anyway because they're not going to be able to afford their homes anymore. So they're going to have to move elsewhere to find new jobs. So if it's not the land disappearing, it's the people having to leave to go elsewhere for work.
To go for better jobs.
Mm-hmm.
What I hear repeatedly over and over again is, man, if they keep passing regulations, my company is going to leave or they're going to lay off.
What if they could be shown that that's not true? What if someone said, there have been regulations passed in the past, many of them, the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act. No one's left. I mean, the pipelines are here. The wells are here. The rigs are offshore here. How could they leave?
We're in Empire, Louisiana. We're about 30 miles above the head of passes, which is the mouth of the Mississippi River. We're about 65 or 70 miles southeast of New Orleans on the Mississippi River. Empire, by weight, is the third biggest seafood port in the country, just after Kodiak, Alaska, and Westport, Virginia. People go to New Orleans and they want to eat at the famous oyster houses, Acme, Drago's, P&J. They want to eat at these places. And Drago's, they get their oysters from Empire. They come from Bayou Cook. There's a truck that's here 4 or 5 times a week getting oysters. That's a big tourist draw. And I mean, there's kind of a disconnect. You're sitting in a building in New Orleans, but this is where they're really coming from. The very land that all these species are living on is just going away. And it's not really land, it's more like grass that's growing out of water, which is it's kind of a nursery for you know, all these species that the economy here depends on. I mean, you know, this place is important.
Swimming today, right now, it's hard. We work about 14 hours a day, you know. Sometimes 16 hours a day. We work hard. We lost a lot of island, canal, and the place we go work, you know. There's no swim like before because you lose a lot of island, you know. I'm afraid in the long term, in the future, I think most of them are not going to survive. You know why? Because you say it's not worth the work, you know.
When I first started as a deckhand, I just always wanted to come home. When we're out there for 4, 5, 6 days, I'll miss home. Miss home very much. When you have kids, when you have a wife, and a lifestyle changes because when you first starts, it's like a totally different lifestyle. Because you know how you go to work every day and you come back home every day. But this you can't. You actually gotta live out in your boat for a couple of days. If you have a big boat, you gotta be out there longer because you have a big boat, you wanna fill it up. If you have a small boat, you can just come back home every day. You know, the price of living is not cheap. I mean, you know, you gotta get food, you gotta get gas, you gotta get diesel, you gotta get fuel, you gotta get oil, you gotta get everything. Every trip you goes out, you come back, you're always gonna have to put money aside for it. Nothing comes free.
We have some of the best product in the world here, but every year pretty much we have to take on a job in the wintertime to survive. And used to you could survive just by shrimping. All the freshwater fish are gone. There's no bass, there's no perch, there's no sac-a-lait, no freshwater catfish. So there's not as much shrimp coming in. The alligators are gone. It's not the same, it's totally different.
It erodes a lot, especially after a hurricane, you know, like whenever we have a hurricane, I mean, we lose so much. When I first built this place, you could walk behind it, but now you can walk back there and it's underwater. It's time to do something because it's washing away too fast.
Yeah, I've stayed at my house more than once during a hurricane. Before a storm, it's usually like it is right now. It's pretty calm and stuff, and then you start seeing the clouds building up and the bands coming in, and then the wind picks up and you get a lot of rain, a lot of cloudiness, windy. Then it gets really bad for a while, then you get the eye over you and it gets back calm again, and you think it's over, then all of a sudden the wind changes and boom, it hits you again, and it's crazy because usually that's when tornadoes are spawned off and stuff. What makes it worse now, you don't have any trees left, so all you got is some grass, okay? Tree roots are stronger than grass roots, and the land breaks off. I've watched land right here. I've watched a good 70 foot, 60, 70 foot of land break off in one section, then about another 30 foot of land break off again in another section and just wash away. Wash away.
Where it was land is now water. Where it was wet is now dry. Hurricanes are getting worse, or they're getting confusing. They zigzag, they don't go straight, everything is changing. So the wetlands, you know, and also the coastline have to be protected against Mother Nature now. We had 14 foot of water in the lower ninth ward in 1965, and where I live at 14 foot of water. And in Katrina, we had 21 feet where I lived at. The houses actually floated.
Before Katrina, floodwaters came in, we didn't give much thought to it. You hear it all the time. We're losing wetlands and all of these, the football fields are wetlands every day. But then after the floodwaters came in, when the levees broke, but people saw flooding like they had never seen before. They saw people at a helpless state where they were on rooftops. And for me, the biggest thing is family, because, you know, not having family had to make choices. Do I go back when there's no schools? Do I go back if there's no hospitals? Do I go back if there's no grocery stores?
People are moving away, you know, people are moving further inland. We almost have like a disposable lifestyle here, you know, where it's like, well, then I'm not gonna buy anything that matters to put in my house, you know. Luckily, we have enough advance notice where we can get out and we can save ourselves from the storm. It's just our belongings, you know, that get destroyed. You know, what's happening is this place is becoming uninsurable. You know, people can't even afford to live here. I mean, you're going to lose an entire culture. You know, this is a tiny town. Like, we're at the front, you know, right now. We're at the front of this problem. You know, New Orleans is next.
People are in denial. They don't want to know it. My friends say, Kathy, don't talk about that. That's too depressing. I don't want to hear it. Particularly people my age who are, you know, in their mid to late 50s, and they've lived here, some of them, for generations. They don't want to hear that their city's going to be destroyed. They don't want to hear that our life as we live it and as we've raised our children is at risk.
If I live to be 80, I don't think there's gonna be nothing left here. Really don't. Nothing. This is gonna all be water. It'll all be water.
If we don't do anything significant soon, we won't be here 100 years from now. We may not be here 50 years from now. That's the reality. When your community becomes unaffordable to invest in, if you can't sell your home because no one will buy it because of risk, if you can't get a new insurance policy, you can't get a mortgage. And it becomes incredibly difficult to attract new business and new citizens to your region. Essentially, you enter a death spiral. That is where we're headed. Not Louisiana alone. It's the same process that is playing out in South Florida. It's playing out in Virginia. It's playing out in parts of New Jersey. We now see in parts of even Manhattan, where Hurricane Sandy taught them and the nation that New York is in part a below sea level city. Time is not our friend. In fact, time is the resource that I worry most about.
If nothing is done at the current rate and what is projected mid-level by the end of the century, most of southeast Louisiana will be underwater. Now, the only one chance left is if the Louisiana master plan for the coast is actually built according to its schedule. And right now, that's not happening. The master plan is a $50 billion 40-year effort. Half of the money for the master plan and half of the master plan is devoted to structural protection from storm surge, mainly flood walls and levees. The other half is for coastal restoration, and to do that, the two primary options are marsh creation, which means dredging, finding sediment either from the river or from other sources and pumping it into these already eroded and sinking wetlands, or river sediment diversions, in which they would divert the river at key spots and let the river move sediment back into these sinking wetlands the way the river originally built them. That's our only hope to keep up with sea level rise and subsidence. What do you guys feel about the coastal master plan? What is your opinion of that? Good, bad? Has it helped you? Is it reasonable? Is it going to work?
Well,
That's hard to say.
yeah.
It'll just be having to wait and see.
Now I fear that it's a little bit too late to truly save a lot of these places.
Decisions are not necessarily being made by people, they're being made for people. You basically can look at the state master plan and you can see exactly how the state predict the future of how Louisiana have to look. And that's how the conversation has to happen in our communities. It's showing people that there's nowhere you can run from. And that's why I'm excited about the state master plan. I, as an organizer, can actually point to a map and say, where do you live? And they point to where they live. I say, here's the projects. What project is by you? I don't have any projects. So what you gonna do?
Right.
Well, the master plan is the best option we have, but the master plan is like a design book that an architect might give you. It tells you what you might build. It doesn't tell you what we're going to build. It's not financed. You can't build the things in there if you don't have the dollars and the right dollars to do what must be done. It's going to require more money than we're talking about coming from the Deepwater Horizon. It's going to require more money than we're talking about getting from offshore oil revenues. All of those things are important. They're not enough to do the job. That's the next part of this master plan. Now, I'm not criticizing here. I mean, quite frankly, without the master plan, I don't think you could get to the financing. But no one should assume that those plans are financed and ready to go. Someone's going to have to make that happen. Someone's going to have to live with the impacts of all of those projects, and someone's going to have to do that soon.
It's going to get worse. But like I said, us older ones, like my mom and all that, I mean, they were raised down here. They don't want to go nowhere else. They want to finish their lives down here. I don't want to move. I've been down here all my life. Why should I go somewhere else? Down here, I mean, we tough, people rebuild. That's what they've done over and over throughout the years. But all the younger ones, they're looking at, the difficulties, all the insurance problems you got. What's the use? That's how they look at it. To me, what would work would be that water diversion. But they're not doing enough diversion.
And would it rebuild it to balance what's being lost at the same time? Or would it build more land?
It would build new land, because certain times of the year when it floods up north, I've worked the Mississippi River. We've taken a 5-gallon bucket of water. Just let it settle down. You'll have half a bucket of dirt.
Wow.
That's how much sediment comes down that river. It would rebuild it.
So the concept of river diversion in Louisiana, or a sediment diversion as we now think of them, is to create a way in which the water and sediment from the Mississippi River can move from the main river channel into the estuary, and therefore begin or restart, if you like, that delta building process that originally built the landscape.
They're gonna pump that much water, there's nothing gonna live. There'll be nothing but fresh water. Pretty much gonna wipe us out. All these little boats will not be able to catch enough to survive, because the salinity in the water will not be correct. The way the salinity with the river, everything's perfect, a perfect mix. When you mess with that, it's gonna be a total different kind of formula that will definitely wipe out the industry here in this location.
The idea that things are going to be very different if we do these diversions very quickly. On the water side, things will be very different very quickly. People are going to be affected by that change, and I think there's great uncertainty about how we as a society are going to cope with that, and I think that really needs to be addressed. I mean, people think that their livelihoods are going to be taken away from them just like that, and there's going to be a lot of change very quickly, and so there has to be a coping mechanism for that, and that has to be kind of part of the package of doing the diversion as far as I'm concerned.
We're pretty much getting low right here where we at. So yeah, freshwater diversion coming to an end for everybody might be good, but I have to build up where I'm at if they real soon too. I would like, if they're gonna do it, I know there's gonna be The shrimping people, the oyster people, the crabbers, whatever, they all gonna get with the law firms and they're gonna fight it and they're gonna try to hold it up in court. What's gonna happen, nobody knows. I would like for the government to come in and just buy everybody out and not fight it. Let's say, hey, look, no need to fight it. Just hey, pay y'all off, let us do what we wanna do, and hopefully it works. And people will just be happy to take what they're gonna get. We're hoping for the best.
You know, I think that the Coastal Master Plan is the best plan we've had in 20 years for this coast. And believe me, I have worked on a lot of coastal restoration plans in the last 20 years. And the first one I worked on was the 1993 Quipra Coastal Restoration Plan. And it talked about abandoning the Birdsfoot Delta and using the resources of the Mississippi River to restore the coast. I worked on another plan in 1998 called Coast 2050. It said pretty much exactly the same thing. Now we've got the master plan that essentially says, you know, sediment diversion is the key. I'd like us to stop talking about it and do it. Or, if we're not gonna do it, decide that we are not gonna do it and stop fooling people that we can actually have a sustainable ecosystem in coastal Louisiana. We don't have to do this, but I think we have to decide and not keep writing reports saying that there is a solution that is viable if we have no intention of exercising it.
In a utopia, not only will we maintain what we have, but we will come up with some type of philosophy and money to where we can actually go back and restore that what's lost. That's in a utopia, perfect world. I'm not naive. I know that everything is not perfect or everything in this world will be perfect. I think for me, it's just a decision. Straight up with me now, make a decision and say, hey guys, it's not looking good. We're not going to get the money. There's no way possible in the foreseeable future that we're going to have the money. We're hopeful that we're going to have the money. You need to make some decisions. I think if you pull the tape off quickly instead of slowly, I think it'll give people more time to recover. Worst case scenario, I can save this community, but I can't save that community. We can start making that transition. Tell us. We can deal with it. Just give us the table where we can sit at. Give us a seat at the table where we can help decide our own future. Don't decide my future for me from a distance by not doing anything.
I used to love, you know, to sit around a group of guys, people are commiserating about, you know, oh man, this place is washing away. Nobody's doing anything about it. You know, I had my own ideas and I just really wanted to just put it into play. And a few years ago, I was able to get together some different groups here, the river pilots, the guys that bring the ships up and down the river, some 4-H students from the local high school. I was able to get some cypress trees from the state, and we were able to go take them down the river near the pilot station and plant them. We got 1,400 trees in the ground in one day, and it was a success. You know, I was able to learn how to plant the trees the right way, and I found out what worked and what didn't. They have a really good root system. I mean, they're just perfect for Louisiana. They knock down the storm surge, so they slow the water that comes with a hurricane down. I've been out in the, you know, and looked at some of my trees, and they have bird nests in them and frogs and, you know, different types of insects, and you know, they're starting to take hold. They're starting to do well. You know, I've had a lot of setbacks, so it hasn't really been easy. You know, a lot of the trees died. I planted 700 in one spot, and I came back 2 weeks later, and they were all gone, but 3. So I'm learning a lot, and every tree I plant, you know, it stands a better chance of living than the last one. If enough people get up on an individual level and do something, then people in power are going to take notice, and then they're going to say, like, you know what, we've got an obligation to these people in this area to really do something about this.
One of our problems is that even if you and I, our family and neighbors, all decide that it's time to do things differently. That doesn't change the mission of your Department of Streets. It doesn't change the Public Works Department mission. It doesn't change the utility that gives you water and pumps your water. It doesn't change the mission of the Environmental Protection Agency. We've essentially given these responsibilities to institutions. Institutions don't change themselves. They don't give themselves new cultures. They don't give themselves new budgets. They don't give themselves new missions. Someone has to do that. And don't assume that they can work without you providing them the support. Be the first to be willing to change. When you're sitting around with your family, it's very easy for folks to say, well, nothing will ever change. That's the way things are. Be the first to say, well, I would be willing. You'd be amazed what the impact you have on those around you, the people you work with, the people you live next to, and the people in your own family. That's where civics begins. And then, don't quit.
A lot of people think that we should restore coastal wetlands in Louisiana because they'll help with storm surge, or because the fisheries are really important that rely on them, or because they're great habitat for waterfowl, or because they provide a nice buffer and some sheltered water that we can more easily move our barges through. There are all kinds of reasons that we might want to restore wetlands in coastal Louisiana. I have to say that I don't think we need a reason like that to restore wetlands in coastal Louisiana. I think that we live on the delta of the 6th largest river in the world. It's a world-class ecosystem. Frankly, it's gone to hell in a handbasket on our watch, and I think we have an obligation to do something about it.
There's a reason why Arkansas does not worry about hurricanes. And the reason is Louisiana.
Yeah.
We're that barrier island right now, is what it is.
So if we go away, what's going to happen to you? Yes, we are in a pickle. Yes, we fight amongst each other like any family would. And yes, we have some issues. But if we go away, you worst off also.
That's it.
I think one of the biggest problems in this area is that we don't value ourselves enough. Like you said, the pipelines are here, the refineries are here, the oil is here. You know, how do we as a community, a collective community, put value on that? And the simple fact is where we're going to go. If we are forced to leave the coast of Louisiana, where will we go?
You know, we are a special culture. And without this land that created this culture, because the people of this area are who we are because of the land that we have lived on, the land that our families for generations have lived on, the waterways that they have worked on, all of that culture comes from that. And without that land, you don't have these people. You don't have this art, you don't have this music, you don't have this food, and that's important too, just as much as the industry, you know, as much as the fish, the oil, everything. You know, we are a special breed, and what would the country be like without us?
That's it. No.
When I was a kid, I used to dream about a nice little cabin along Bayou B Avenue camps, so I can just die looking at what I love, you know. But if it don't happen, I'm going to be an advocate for the environment until the day I die. We have to make people know how important that is. We have to get in Washington. We have to lobby like we are running for mayors and governors and presidents and stuff like that. We have to lobby for the wetlands. We have to fight. If we don't fight, it will never happen. And I'm selfish. I want it all to stay the same way it's supposed to. But now it ain't anymore, so let's try our best to not destroy anymore and try to fix what we broke. That's what we need to do.